everyone to drop their name and location in the chat, just so we know where people are calling in from today. And, this is, again, like we always say this on our calls, but this is an anti-oppressive space. So any language in the chat, anything Islamophobic, any, Zionist comments, sexist, anything like that will result in an automatic ejection from the chat. So we just want to make sure that, if anyone's experiencing anything, to please just message one of the hosts here. And otherwise, we just wanted to ground us in that. And again, my name is Celine. I'm with the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights, and I'm based in Southern California. We'll get started in about 1 more minute. And we've sent the message in the chat as well that any oppressive language will result in an automatic ejection from the chat. And you can message USCPRA tech cues and resources if someone is DMing you anything inappropriate. And otherwise, feel free to use the chat to engage, ask questions, use the Q&A feature actually to ask questions so that we can track them. But you can feel free to respond to things in the chat or talk to each other in the chat as well. All right. So I think we'll maybe just go ahead and get started because the agenda is a bit packed. Thank you all so much for joining. We know it's really busy times and there's a lot going on, and we wanted to convene this webinar because, as you all know, today is tax day, and we're hosting this call on tax day because we know that our tax dollars are being used to basically fund a war on Iran. We know that the Israeli military is dropping US-made bombs to massacre families in Iran, Lebanon, and Palestine. And this war on Iran, which is the most unpopular war in US history, has already cost upwards of $28 billion. And at the same time, we know that ICE is basically taking in billions of dollars to terrorize immigrant communities here in the United States. So basically, we're being told, as people who live in the US, that we're being told to accept unaffordable rent, rising grocery prices, gas prices, medical debt, slashed public services, while billions are still being routed into war and into occupation and genocide. And we wanted to convene this because we know that the majority of people here in the US do not want their taxpayer dollars going to Israel or going to wars. So, just to understand how this money actually gets sent to Israel, it's not just like a check is sent to Israel every year. It's the US military aid to Israel is basically used to purchase weapons and military services from US defense companies. So it's basically a public subsidy for the US weapons industry flowing directly to US defense contractors. And that's why also when we're thinking about like pushing against the use of our tax dollars for war and genocide, it's important for us to remember also why, or to think about and relate it to arms embargo as an important demand and a campaign, because it is one of the clearest ways for us to articulate and interrupt the pipeline that turns public money into private profit and into genocide and occupation. So, on tax day, we want to highlight this because we're, always being told that there's never enough money for housing, for healthcare, for education, for food, but there's always money somehow for bombs, prisons, deportation, and occupation. And that's because we know what the US prioritizes to continue its imperialist project. And we also know that rejecting tax dollars to Israel is also not enough. When we say arms embargo, we're talking about a full two-way arms embargo. That means no money to Israel or purchasing from Israel. So terminating contracts, collaborations, and not just public, but also private funds as well. So, we've posted up, if you go to the Not My Tax Dollars website or USCPR Actions page on Instagram, you can see there's some new graphics that have been dropped about the fact that we pay $12 billion in federal tax dollars for Israel's weapons. And this instead could basically fund upwards of 600,000 people's homes with 1 year's free rent. It can get over 300,000 students' loan debt canceled. It can buy 1 year's worth of free groceries for about 2 million families, and help over 3 million children's free or low-cost healthcare for 1 year. So there's so much money that this otherwise could be going into. So, that's what the Not My Tax Dollars campaign is fundamentally about. It's about demanding that our resources are going towards, healthcare, housing, schools, and not to genocide, occupation, and deportation. So today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be introducing a new toolkit that we put out to think about ways that we can, put our politicians on the spot, like put them on record around their positions on the war on Iran and on an arms embargo. We're also going to be hearing about an example of a local city council resolution that was recently passed in Richmond that expressed opposition to the war and support for an arms embargo. We'll also be hearing from Congresswoman Delia Ramirez, who's going to speak to us about the Block the Bombs and Melt Ice Act. And we'll also be taking action together in the final part of the call. So we really highly encourage you all to stay on because there's an important vote today, the JRD vote that we'll be talking about that's going to be happening as we're together. So, or starting as we're together. So we want to make sure that we are all taking action together to put as much pressure as possible. And we'll be using the Not My Tax Dollars action tools before we close out. So, as we know, we can go to the next slide. This is an important moment for us to be challenging our elected officials to stop the, war on Iran, on Lebanon, and Gaza. And we created this toolkit, which we'll link in the chat and send in the follow-up, to encourage folks to identify, opportunities to show up at, elected officials' events and to ask them questions, or to bird dog them. And so this toolkit should help you basically choosing, how do I decide on a local target? How do I pick which politician or elected official I'm going to be, showing up to, their events and asking questions to? So just to explain what bird dogging is, it's basically seeking out a decision maker and confronting them about an issue to just get them on record. And this allows us to leverage what politicians already care about, which is public opinion and support of their donors. And, I want to share like some of these tips that, are reflected in the toolkit and also that Brittany from About Face shared with us on a recent workshop that we had. Basically like this tactic of bird dogging can be used to, push politicians to get on record, to articulate or take a position. And to be effective with this, we need to think both about like who's the audience or who's the constituency of the elected official you're bird dogging and how those audiences relate to your demand. So in terms of preparing, we have here in this toolkit some tips on how to identify a strategic target. You want to ask yourself questions like, does this person have power or influence over your issue? And how vulnerable are they to pressure? So it's important to be clear about what our goals are. And it's important to think about what tone we want to take in order to get the best results. So when we're thinking about, which elected officials we want to show up in bird dog, we're thinking about, if there are people who are hard opposition, who are not movable on an issue, and they're really far from flipping on the issue and supporting us, then we might take a more confrontational tone. But the reason for this is, to not to maybe necessarily, change their mind, but to, one, express dissent from their base, and two, to also dial up the pressure to show other elected officials that are watching that this is something that people are upset about, and confronting that. So it's not really about moving your target, it's about creating a popular conversation that puts pressure on other people who might be closer to moving our way. And again, like the kinds of questions that we're highlighting in this toolkit that we really want to encourage people, to ask about and to use in their bird dogging is, focusing on questions related to the war. Are politicians going to continue to fund endless wars, fund the war on Iran and the bombing of children's schools instead of funding social services in the US? Are these politicians going to take a position on supporting an arms embargo following years of genocide and continued taxpayer dollars, the fact that taxpayer dollars continue to be used to send weapons to Israel? So these are really like the questions that we want to be focusing on. And we're also sharing this because we really want to encourage people to think about new tactics and that to know that the fact that this is a good moment for these tactics and for putting pressure on our elected officials. And it's important for us to think about we're running these long-term campaigns, we're doing all this work on the ground, and we also want to be able to put, our elected officials on the spot and make sure that we can get them on record around to increase pressure against and show that the public is against the war and against the taxpayer dollars being sent to fund weapons to Israel. And then let's say in that case that you have the opposite situation where you have a politician who is hasn't really taken a hardline stance one way or another, who is, maybe figuring out what they want to do. In that case, you might want to do a less confrontational bird dog to dial up the pressure, but not so hardline that you alienate them. And if you look into the toolkit, there are really good examples, like video examples that we won't get to today, but that you can watch to see different kind of case studies of successful bird dogs and effective bird dogging events. So we want to, basically still be in a place if you're targeting an elected official that might shift their opinion or might come towards your, side, that you want to be in a place where you put pressure, but you can also pull them towards our movement. So this is all this to say that we want to be thinking strategically. Who are we selecting as our targets? Where does this person fall on the spectrum, of allies or opposition? And what are we going to do to get the best results? And again, the main questions we're really thinking about are the war in Iran, continued military funding to Israel and weapons sales. We can also confront about lobby money and also support for ICE and really confront them about that as well. So, in terms of finding opportunities, like when, where can you, bird dog an elected official, you can look at the congressional calendar or session calendar to identify events that you might want to attend, or just get on a social media or email list to see what events you can attend. And in here also in the toolkit, if you scroll through it, you'll also find tips to building your own team, including, having someone take good footage, having someone ask good questions, using a good mic, and things like that. So again, like keeping in mind that if we're using these tactics, we are trying to not only confront politicians and get them on record, but we're trying to also activate a base and speak to issues that the base cares about. So throughout this call, we're going to be learning about different things. We're talking now about bird dogging as a tactic to increase pressure and increase this public conversation about opposition to the war and our support for an arms embargo. We're going to hear about city council resolutions. We're going to hear about congressional level bills, and we're going to also take action together along these lines. So we want to offer this to everyone here to have materials and resources that you all need to go away and think about how you can implement this in your own locales or use this to support your campaigns as well. So we can go to the next slide. We just have some sample questions, here. These are sample questions you can think about depending on the target you're selecting. So let's say you're talking to progressives, you want to bring up arms embargo. You can say, hey, will you support an arms embargo on Israel to stop US complicity in these wars? Will you commit to signing the Block the Bombs Act? For politicians, for example, in swing districts or in districts that are really focused on economic issues, you can talk about, you can say something like, I'm asking a yes or no question. Will you go on the record opposing another endless war in the Middle East? Will you commit to end the flow of our tax dollars to bomb schools in Iran and instead fund schools in our own communities? We can go to the next slide. And again, this is all in the toolkit, so don't worry about capturing all the language here. For politicians in races where, deportation, ICE is a major issue, it's important to also ask questions like, do you oppose any further spending of our tax dollars on deportation and forever wars? And then you have politicians, of course, that take AIPAC and AI lobby dollars, and you can ask questions around why are you continuing to take money from these PACs that prioritize profit over people? So we wanted to offer these as sample questions. We drafted sample questions. We want to encourage folks, especially right now, today's tax day. We're going to, encourage this in the coming weeks. We have Nakba Day happening next month. It's election season. Really encourage folks to think about these different tactics and tools that they can use. And we wanted to spend some time today talking about bird dogging, again, with the objectives of not only getting politicians on the record, but again, increasing this conversation on a national level and really popularizing opposition to the war, opposition to taxpayer dollars being used for military funding, and continued funding in general for deportation, for war, and for occupation and genocide. So you can find all this material in the toolkit. And I want to just quickly call on Iman if you can speak for 2 minutes about the JRD vote, and then we're going to go ahead and hear about a city council resolution exam.
Thanks, Celine, and hi, everyone. My name is Iman, and I'm the political director here at the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights Action. Thank you all for joining us. I think this is just an absolutely critical time, and we're so fortunate to be welcomed with Representative Delia Ramirez's presence in a second. And just also excited to kind of be together in this moment where the Senate is going to take up both a very profound debate and opportunity to vote at two resolutions that are extremely important to us in this moment, especially with the rise of the Trump administration trying to circumvent congressional approval on military transfers, all those sorts of things that are being, all these sorts of weapons that are being used, not only on Palestine, but on Iran, on Syria, on Lebanon, and the absolute onslaught of destruction that we're witnessing here today. And so I wanted to just bring up the fact that there are two resolutions that are coming up. They're called joint resolutions of disapprovals. The first is the SJ Res 138, which is a resolution that would actually block the sale of 1,000-pound bombs. And then there's SJ Res 32, which would block the sale of Caterpillar bulldozers. And especially for those who have been part of the Palestinian movement for an extremely long time, you'd recognize the role of Caterpillar in the destruction of Palestinian homes. And now, as we've most recently seen, the destruction of Syrian homes, Lebanese homes, even homes in Iran. And it's just absolutely wild that we continue to transfer out these types of equipment to continue engaging in these unlawful actions. And so Senator Bernie Sanders actually brought these forth to the floor immediately upon recess being, members of Congress, specifically the Senate being called from their recess. And so there's these two different opportunities that senators get the chance to take up to kind of, again, showcase their opposition to the Trump administration and showcase their opposition to the incredible assault and aggression that is happening abroad across the Middle East. Again, both in Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, Iran, all these sorts of places that we're witnessing where this larger war is now escalating across the region. And it's critical for us to be able to kind of pinpoint these legislative vehicles that give members of Congress the opportunity to publicly oppose these actions taken by the Trump administration and the Zionist administration, as well as many of these bombs and these bulldozers are being used directly by Israeli military to engage in these unlawful activities. And so one thing that we're actually going to do in a few minutes towards the end of this call is take some action to call out those members of Congress, our senators, to specifically stand up and support these resolutions. These types of resolutions have come forth in the past. Senator Sanders has brought up the Caterpillar resolution actually in the past. And so we have another opportunity here to make sure that we're voicing our concerns and making sure that our senators are aware of the fact that this is a really critical moment for them to step up. And it's also a really, it's such an important moment because it's also in the midst of all these conversations on supplemental funding, all these conversations on the types of war crimes that the administration is committing, and all these opportunities that, members of Congress have called out, but haven't necessarily stepped up into. And so now that we have a senator who stepped up into this moment, we really need to follow through and encourage as many senators as possible to take up the vote, in favor of these resolutions to block the bombs and to block the Caterpillars. We should not be engaging in the transfer of any weapons that are being used to engage in anything regarding these types of violations of international and domestic law. And we also shouldn't be encouraging the military transfer of, the transfer of bombs or bulldozers that are being used to completely destroy homes, destroy families, all those sorts of things. And so we have an opportunity to kind of showcase, again, what's important to us. And so the debate is actually happening and we'll start on the Senate floor at 5:30. And so as we're actually gathered here together, the debate will begin and may even move into the vote, although everything moves quite slow in Congress. But I think it's actually really amazing that we're here together. We get the opportunity to take action in these last few extremely critical moments. And so I hope that you'll stay with us until the end of the call and take action. And even after that, take action until those votes are made. And after that, we have an opportunity to also put those folks on record that choose not to stand up for the JRDs, right? Not support them and make sure that they're called out. So to Celine's point, we really do want to turn up the heat and also make sure that we're showcasing and using our voices in a way that can actually really benefit, really push these senators to take up the right choice, make up the right choices, and to also know that if they don't make the right choices, there are consequences to it. And so, grateful for you all. Thank you all for, I'll drop the resolutions in the chat as well here, just so everyone sees them. And I know that we'll also share our action in a bit following Delia Ramirez's comments. But I'll pass it back.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Amanda. Yeah, just really want to reiterate, after this webinar, take all the action tools and share them with your lists, networks, friends, continue to use them. And, just to respond to one of the comments in the chat, just to summarize, if your target is totally an opposition, you want to be more confrontational to express dissent from, their base. If they're wishy-washy, you can be more less hardline, but still bird dogging to increase the pressure and try to get them on record. And if super supportive, that's great. You can thank them, but also have them call on others. Like there's always the next thing that we need them to do, and it doesn't stop at solely expressing an opinion or a position, right? So again, like generally we're talking about ways we can increase public pressure and popularize the opposition to the war and to continued weapon sales to Israel. So, with that, I want to turn to Aisha, who organizes with the Oakland People's Embargo for Palestine, or the Oakland People's Arms Embargo, and who worked on passing a resolution in Richmond, which expressed opposition to the war on Iran and in support of an arms embargo. And again, these resolutions are important because they create local legitimacy for anti-war demands. They give electeds a chance to go on record. They generate media attention, and they help build organized pressure to leverage in our longer term campaigns. So just want to pass it to you, Aisha, to just tell us like how you guys did it. Talk to us about the resolution, and we'll come back in about 10 minutes or so. So go ahead.
Thanks, Celine. Hi, everyone. My name is Aisha. I use she, her pronouns. I'm based here in Oakland, but I actually grew up in Washington, and I want to give a huge shout out to all the Washington folks. I saw Pasco, Olympic Peninsula, Tacoma, Seattle, so we're representing hard today. And thanks USCPR for this toolkit. It's really timely and super necessary right now. So I want to talk to you about this arms embargo resolution, why it's significant, why it was needed for us, why we decided to deploy it, some of the pitfalls that come along, and then also thinking about, how we did it and what are our next steps from it. So for folks who are familiar with some of the ceasefire resolutions, Richmond is a really significant city in the United States because it was the first city to pass a unanimous call for ceasefire. Right after October 7th, 2023. And since then, there's been a growing progressive movement around Palestine. And I want to give also all the kudos and shouts to the Richmond Progressive Association, who's really held it down and held a principled position on Palestine and why we've seen such monumental leaps and bounds for Palestine from this small city that's in the Bay Area, but very close to Oakland. So this arms embargo resolution was significant. You can go actually to the slide before this, because this is the second part of it. Okay, yeah. So this arms embargo resolution was the first resolution in the United States that called for a complete and total arms embargo on the state of Israel. And it named Israel specifically, which is pretty also monumental, just given the anti-BDS laws and how much repression and Zionist backlash that we've seen anytime Israel is significantly is named in some sort of legislative vehicle. So this was housed within an anti-war resolution, right? It called for an end to the war in Iran. It called to actually the ending of our tax dollars going to fund the war in Iran, and then it also called for the arms embargo on Israel. We really were able to ask the Richmond City Council to move on this resolution for a couple different reasons. One, obviously, because of their progressive position and the work that they've done to build a base in that community. Like, I want to give complete recognition to that. And I also think that the Palestine movement has done a really good job at showing up to defend our city council members, our mayors, when there's Zionist backlash. And so through this, we were able to build deep relationships with one another. And we're moving on a campaign, you can go to the next slide, called the Oakland People's Arms Embargo. And the Oakland People's Arms Embargo campaign is a campaign that would stop the shipments of F-35 components that are flowing out of the Oakland airport that are going to the Nevatim Air Base. In the past year, we've tracked over 250 shipments. These are critical components that the Israeli military is beyond a reasonable doubt using to enact their genocide in Gaza and now Lebanon and Iran. And so the demand around this campaign is actually targeted at the Port Commission, because the Port Commission is who has the complete and total jurisdiction over these cargo shipments. But the Port Commission is not an elected body, and they're actually appointed by Mayor Barbara Lee, who used to be a part of the squad and was a congresswoman before she stepped back down to becoming mayor. And so really, we've built incredible pressure around this campaign. The coalition is over 30 organizations strong. We have over 350 organizational endorsements, including the Alameda Labor Council, who unanimously endorsed the campaign. And given that they are not an elected body, leveraging pressure against the port commissioners have been really difficult. And so we kind of actually went back to the drawing board where we decided that right now, what's really important for us to do is to popularize the demand for an arms embargo. And so through the relationships that we had built with the Richmond Progressive Association, Sohaila Bana, Mayor Eduardo Martinez, we were able to basically pull our base and say that this is something that we really need. Richmond is a city that uses the Oakland airport. And even though you guys do not have the jurisdiction over the shipments that are going out, this is a political intervention that you can make to raise the consciousness of the masses and help direct our base and the grassroots movement towards actually enacting something that's material. So I think that we're at this phase right now where we're thinking about how the symbolic is able to actually create the avenues for us to move forward on something that's material. Since then, we've now had 2 different council members, one from Berkeley and then one of our board of supervisors, which is essentially the council members for San Francisco, come out in explicit support of the campaign. And through some of the bird dogging and phone banking calls that we've been making towards Barbara Lee, we actually got Barbara Lee to make a statement in support of the campaign. So this is all to say that we really encourage folks who are trying to move forward on a material demand and are feeling like they're stuck and they're unable to garner some support for this, to actually think about ways that we can move forward on, resolutions and things that feel more symbolic as a first step towards achieving that material demand. I think that when we look back on ceasefire, we can see how ceasefire, there was pitfalls, obviously, that came along with it. And there was a significant shift in popular consciousness that also came from it. So we're really hoping that Richmond can, play the role that it did with ceasefire and now play that role with arms embargo, and we can see this proliferate out. And I believe that the resolution is actually linked in the toolkit. So if folks want to reference it, you can see it there.
Amazing. Wow, perfect timing. Thank you so much, Aisha. And yes, in the toolkit, if you scroll all the way down, there's a section on city council resolutions, and you can find the language used in Richmond, and that's a model we want to, circulate and encourage people to think about. And like what Aisha's saying about popularizing this demand, like this is a really good example of like how you use bird dogging to increase pressure and push an elected official to, get on record or, support a local campaign or a position that you want them to take. And, popularizing this demand helps our campaigns. Like what we are able to do on a material level really depends on narrative. If public opinion didn't shift against Israel so heavily throughout the genocide, as it definitely should, the global isolation of Israel and the material consequences of that would not have been possible, right? So it's really important for us to really figure out ways that we can take action to, even if things don't have a quote unquote material impact, these bird dogging tactics are really really important ways. City council resolutions, things like that can help actually increase the narrative and popular pressure and show where the public opinion really stands on, the war and continued weapons supply to Israel, right? So yeah, just wanted to say that's a really important lesson. It was really helpful to hear how the Richmond organizations accomplished this, and hope you all can think about this for your own locales, and also think about obviously how this can support your existing work. And if folks are interested in general in getting involved or interested in arms embargo, you can feel free to reach out to us. Maybe Leah and I can drop our emails in the chat or something, but we do host meetings to support local organizations who are interested in taking up arms embargo work, and we host those alongside the People's Embargo for Palestine. All right, so I don't know if Congresswoman Ramirez, okay, so she's going to be a few minutes late. So what we'll do in the meantime is let's actually take action together. If we can go to the digital action tool, yes. So let's use this link to go ahead and send an instant digital letter. So while we're here for a few minutes, let's all get on this link right now. Again, as Iman said, the JRD votes are set to start very, very soon. Let us go ahead and use this action tool. We'll link it in the chat. We're screen sharing it right now. All you have to do is put your information, click start writing, and then click send on the email unless you want to personalize it a bit. And once you finish that, please take a few minutes to just send this link to everybody that you know. Send it to your family chats, friend chats, networks, organizations. Let's do that for about like 2-3 minutes, and then just let us know in the chat when you've done that, and we'll come back. And again, once you've filled that out, share it to 5 people, at least 5 people that you know, and encourage them to fill it out as well. We'll come back in about 2 minutes. Again, if you've completed the action item, send the link to 5 people you know, send it to group chats, and we'll come back. And you can literally copy what Leah just sent in the chat, that Trump is fast tracking 660 billion of weapons or million of bombs and weapons to Israel, and the Senate is voting to stop them right now. So please take 20 seconds to email your senators. So we'll go ahead and start coming back. And after we hear from, oh, here she is. Hi. Thank you so much for joining.
Of course, thanks for the patience.
No problem. We just took action together to email our reps about the JRD vote. So welcome, Rep. Delia Ramirez. Thank you so much for joining us. So we just wanted to have you on to speak with us about the Block the Bombs Act and the Melt Ice Act, which you are leading. And just especially now, given that, you know, these acts are really important, especially in this moment, because they've been representing generally the massive shift in public opinion, you know, against continued U.S. military funding to Israel, and also just given the wave and the increase of repression that we've seen by ICE and the terrorization of immigrant communities in the U.S., like how important these acts are in this moment. So we would love to, you know, we know you have a short time with us today, but we would love to hear from you, like why. You know, can you talk to us a little bit about these bills, what they do, and why are they so urgent in this moment? And especially now, even with the war on Iran and everything too.
Yeah, the war on Iran, the war on Lebanon, the war on Cuba, and the list goes on. Well, first, Celine, it's really great to be with all of you today, for the ways that you all constantly show up, even when our own colleagues, even when my own colleagues, members of Congress, fail you. So look, I think most of you know who I am, but every time I enter any space, I want to come back to what grounds me, what roots me into this work, and why I see a duality, whether it's when we're having conversations about IDF and ICE, or when we're having conversations about Humboldt Park in Palestine. I'm a proud daughter of Guatemalan immigrants. I'm a citizen by birthright. I am the member of Congress with the Born in the USA Act bill, which really affirms that being a citizen born in this country, whether it was today, 10 years ago, or 100 years ago, makes you a citizen. But I'm also the wife of an incredible man who until recently was a DACA recipient. Boris was living in the shadows since the age of 14, and he's turning 41 on Friday. And as I think about the dualities of who I am, I'm clear that being a congresswoman of a welcoming state in a district that's fed up with this administration's violence against our communities gives me a sense of responsibility of the work that I need to do and how I show up in this place. And I want to start by really acknowledging how difficult I would say these last months have been, but frankly, the last year, the last 2 years, and for many, forever, right? Because people have been experiencing truly a war on themselves, a war on our communities. And I also am clear that everything that is happening cuts to services Americans rely on, whether we're talking about healthcare, whether we're talking about education, or mass detention and deportations, attacks on human rights defenders, the death and displacement of Palestinian people, and the unlawful wars waged against Iran, Cuba, Venezuela, and Lebanon, they're all interconnected. From Palestine to Chicago, our communities are confronting the pain, the fear, and violence of unaccountable leaders attempting to advance their fascist agenda. And we see it. They're waging connected campaigns of terror against our neighbors, our families, our loved ones. They're casting our communities as a public enemy, and they're trying to do everything they can to silence dissenting voices, even in our universities. They're robbing children and generations of families at the opportunity to be able to have thriving, successful, healthy futures so they can enrich their billionaire friends and so that they can expand their Department of War. And warmongers, authoritarians, and despots like Trump and Bibi Netanyahu, they want our resources. They want our land. They want our freedoms. They want our lives so they can advance their imperialistic authoritarian agendas, not just in some parts of the world, but across the world. And what they would hope more than anything is to keep us confused. They want to rob us of our hope, and they want to paralyze us with fear. They want us divided. They want us isolated. They don't want us to understand that what Homeland Security is doing here is interconnected with what has been happening in Palestine for decades. And they think that if they can keep us silent, they're going to be able to win. But we see right through it. And it's why we're taking action now, because we know that Netanyahu and Trump are lethal, unaccountable extremist duo that must be held accountable. Netanyahu is using US supplied weapons to perpetrate multi-front campaigns of starvation, displacement, and death in violation of US international and humanitarian laws. At the same time, my colleagues here want to expand the HS budget, infusing 150 billion with a B into DHS, even after advancing a Trump budget that would lead to starvation, displacement, and death at home for so many Americans. And they're using our taxpayer dollars, as I think about tax day, to do what? Punish dissent, disappear our neighbors, fuel fear and panic, erode our resistance, and weaken the ties that bind us together so that we can continue, erode really those ties that allow us to be able to fight these wannabe kings. And it's despicable. And there's stuff that we could be doing. Look, I hear a lot of my colleagues say to me, Delia, look, we have to wait until Democrats are in the majority. Our communities cannot wait until Democrats are possibly in the majority. Some of our family members don't know that they're going to make it to November, don't know if they're going to make it to tomorrow. Waiting to put a stop to these bombs until next year is telling Palestinians, people in Lebanon, Iran, and all over the world that let's just hope that your family doesn't get bombed tomorrow. Maybe in January we can do something. And it's why, for me, it's so important that in this moment, we have the courage to take the votes necessary to stop what we're doing. And that's why I, for one, has voted against any military aid for Israel. Is why I'm sponsoring every joint resolution of disapproval on weapons transfer, and why I am the lead sponsor of Block the Bombs Act. Not a resolution, an actual bill. Because in this moment, we don't need to have it is resolved. What we're doing is a genocide. We need action that ensures that this genocide that stops immediately and we don't see another genocide happen ever again. And for me, Block the Bombs is a line on the sand. It's a first step towards real oversight and accountability for the consequence of a military campaign that you and I know has leveled Gaza, displaced millions, and killed over 62,000 Palestinians, including hungry children who are waiting in line for food. And as we address the violence that our government has enabled in Gaza, in Venezuela, in Cuba, in Iran, Lebanon, we also have to address the out-of-control abusive terror force set loose by this administration in our own communities, whether Chicago, Minneapolis, North Carolina, Portland, Oregon, and the list goes on. Because for over a year, we've witnessed the violence in our cities, the shooting of our neighbors. It didn't start with Renee and Alex. It started with Silverio, with Marimar, with Keith, with Linda, with Ruben, and 16 people who have died just this year in detention. And there has to be accountability. And it's why I've also introduced the Melt ICE Act. Now, is it the full abolish ICE bill that I want to see? No, but it is another line on the sand. It ends DHS immigration detention and monitoring completely. It disrupts DHS immigration enforcement, and that takes all that money, those billions that I just talked to you about, and returns them to our communities for healthcare, for housing, and critical services. I've been clear that this moment requires us to move beyond statements, beyond prayers, beyond promises, and we have to actually demonstrate our commitment to real accountability. So what I want to ask you all as you take action, continue to challenge policies that destroy life, rob our children of futures, dehumanize our neighbors, and call out members of Congress and elected officials to actually be the light and love in dark times and dark places. We have to build coalitions. We have to understand that our liberations are entwined with each other. I am the daughter of Guatemalan immigrants, and I want to see a free Palestine. And it means that we have to see how across our intersections and issues, we have to work together so that we get the collective liberation our communities deserve. And it's why I understand that the unlawful actions used against immigrants and Palestinians today are going to be used against anyone they deem undesirable or a threat to fascism, because fascism always demands a public enemy. So we must block the bombs. We also must melt ice, and I need your help to get it done.
Thank you so much, Rep Ramirez. Like, honestly, I just want to reiterate the comments in the chat about, appreciating you for your sense of urgency and for being the champion of these bills, to the Block the Bombs Act and the Melt Ice Act. And, to what you're saying, like the assault on Venezuela, the war on Cuba, the war on Lebanon, on Gaza, on Iran and the region, this violation of sovereignty is to clear the way for the US to seize and make profit off of the world's richest oil reserves. Like, since 1953, right. The US has been saying that they need to secure US control over Middle Eastern and Venezuelan oil, and that would be necessary for US defense and war. So, this is, obviously like a pipeline turning stolen resources into corporate wealth and corporate wealth into war and so on. And so it's really important that we have people like you in Congress who can be champions of actually representing what people have been demanding for so long. And with that, just final question for you. We'd love to ask, can you talk to us about why it's important actually to keep up the pressure on our elected officials and how you've seen it work? Because I know a lot of people can be disillusioned with that. So it'd be great to hear why it's important for us to keep up the pressure.
Well, first, Celine, I understand why people are disillusioned with members of Congress and elected officials and politicians who promise one thing and do another. I work with them, I know. And two, let me just say to you that the work that you all are doing, whether it's the phone calls, the organizing, the student movements in our universities, the protests, showing up at town halls, making sure that your voice is heard and making the connections, it's making a difference. Look, a year ago, I was told that if I introduced Block the Bombs, I'd be lucky if I got 7 people and I would get primaried and no longer be able to represent my community. That's what I was told. Today, 64 members of Congress, some of them who received support from AIPAC when they got elected, have 1 rejected AIPAC and 2 signed on to Block the Bombs. Your organizing is what's going to make the difference, and it's what's going to shift the narrative here. A few of us were able to call it what it was, genocide, at the beginning, and now more than 15 members of Congress have had the courage to call it what it is. You can't change something unless you actually understand what the problem is. The only way we do that is through the work that you're doing, organizing. And I'm an organizing member of Congress. I did organizing before I came here. I understand that it's people and resources. That's how we shift the powers in the halls of Congress. So I need you to keep calling. We only have 12 members of Congress on Melt Ice. How many members of Congress have you heard at town halls talk about, we need to melt ice? Maybe defund it. Some of them say abolish, but they're not on the bill just yet because they need to feel the pressure. They need to hear from their constituents. We need to keep organizing. So the only way we do this is the level of organizing that we're talking about here. I need you to make those 15 calls and then get 2 people to make 20 more calls. They have to hear from you, because if they don't feel the pressure. And if they don't feel the pressure, they don't do the work.
Thank you so much. Yeah, exactly. I think we had, just before you hopped on, we're talking about what are the tactics that we can use to keep up the pressure and to, show up to events, show up to forums and put politicians on record. Like, can you say that, can you sign on to block the bombs? Can you sign on to the Melt IS Act? And can you actually express a position and actually act on it? So, you know, it's really important for us to be hearing this now, and we want to disseminate this message really widely because, you know, we've been, ever since also, you know, the genocide started, have been convening people, calling our reps and everything. And I think it's really great and empowering to hear that it does make a difference and that it does have an impact, and that people need to continue to organize on a local level and to increase pressure as much as possible. Yeah, I don't know if you have any more time with us, but if you'd like to share any closing comments, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I see Joe and my comms person telling me you have the next thing coming up. Let me end with saying this to you. Melt Ice and Block the Bombs are an organizing vehicle for us. When you hear people, when you hear members of Congress talk about we need solutions, we're going to work on it, these are two bills that actually get to the core of what we're talking about. And I want you to see them as the vehicle that uses a tangible way to measure if in fact they are serious about holding the line and doing something about what's happening in Gaza and what's happening in our streets. And so continue to use those as those vehicles, whether it's the letters. I saw a bunch of ways that you can go ahead and engage. But I think it's important for people to know that when you actually ask specific concrete action, you can measure where your member of Congress is, and you can use that as an organizing opportunity to keep putting that pressure. Please do not stop. I know that it's exhausting when you don't hear back from them, when you feel like you're being gaslit, when you have a number of people who are telling you, yeah, no, I'm going to get around to it, or I don't know the bill, or when they say block the bombs, it's too general and too narrow. It's like almost like what talking point they give you. Pick one or the other, right? If you're going to criticize a bill that you haven't heard or read. But I also want you to know that your organizing works. I got to end in saying this to you. Yes, we have 64 members of Congress on the bill right now. We got to get to 75, and I need your help. And two, over 234 candidates around the country running for Congress have taken the pledge that if, in fact, they get elected to Congress, they will immediately sign on to block the bombs. I need you to hear that. Your work is the reason we are at the juncture we are now. More people know who these foreign lobbies are, whether it's the foreign lobbies that are trying to buy politicians so that they don't have the courage to say abolish ICE and dismantle DHS, or those that are willing to now have to figure out how they respond to the fact that they've taken all this money from foreign lobbies that are sending your money to war. Your organizing works. Keep doing it. You are the voice that's going to change these systems, because they will not be changed from the inside. It will happen from the outside. You are the outside that makes it possible. So let's do it.
Thank you so much. And, you know, I'm seeing so many appreciations for you in the chat here. And again, really want to appreciate you taking the time to speak to us today. We've been convening these so consistently since the beginning of the genocide. And there's so many folks organizing on the ground, putting together coalitions to organize against ICE, to protect their neighbors. We've got people who are organizing for an arms embargo on a local level. And as you know, Congresswoman Ramirez is saying, these are organizing tools. This is something we can tangibly take to increase the pressure, to maintain the pressure. Block the Bombs has an unprecedented number of supporters. And it's important for us to continue both the local organizing and the tactics to keep Palestine, to keep, abolish ICE, to keep all of this on the agenda and make sure that it's not out of, media attention, and to keep making sure that the conversation, is increasing to popularize and continue popularizing the fact that the majority of people in the US are against these things. So again, want to express appreciations to Congresswoman Ramirez and reiterate some of the points we've been mentioning about taking action, using these acts as bills as an organizing tool, and taking any organizing opportunity that you can to increase pressure. With that, we want to pass it to Kat and Danny, who are going to be talking to us and walking us through the Not My Tax Dollars action tools to help folks think about what can you do on a local level, and to encourage folks to take action together right now. So I encourage you all to stay on until the very end of the call.
Thank you, Celine. And thank you so much, Representative Ramirez, for grounding us in the continued fight in on where our tax dollars are going and how we can fight to make sure that our tax dollars are funding care for our communities, housing, healthcare, education, instead of funding the bombs and weapons and ICE abductions in our neighborhoods. I'm going to share my screen here in just a moment to pull up more slides that we could look at together. All right. Today is tax day. We all know that money coming right out of our paychecks, our taxes, are those contributing to the billions of dollars that our government is spending on killing our people, killing Palestinian families, killing Iranian families, killing Lebanese families, and fueling the ICE deportation and detention machine, committing human rights abuses, both here in the US and abroad. So the next step that we would like to invite you to do is to, now that you've already sent your instant digital to your members of Congress, to ask them to vote today to block the bombs if they're in the Senate, or to sponsor the Block the Bombs Act if they're in the House. We now invite you to get out a piece of paper. You have a couple different options here. You can physically print out a letter. If you have a printer nearby, you can go to this page, notmytaxdollars.org/take action. I'll share this tab here so you could see. And on here, there are links to print your own demand letter or your own thank you letter. So if your representative has already signed on to the Block the Bombs Act, you could print a thank you letter right here. And it'll have a special thank you message, as you can see right here. It says thank you. And then you could write your own personal message or note on there as well. So everything you need is on this page. If you scroll through here, you could find the mailing address for your member of Congress to address your envelope. There's also a tracking form down here that you could use to tell us that you sent your letter, so that we can keep track and keep a record of that. But we invite you particularly to send a physical letter, a printed letter, because it's a physical representation of your demands, of your voice, and ultimately of all the voices of all of these constituents, of all the people who members of Congress have been trying to ignore. And we refuse to be ignored. We will keep up the fight, and tailing these letters, piling up these letters, and then using those letters to then confront our politicians and elected officials with all of these voices, all of these stories, all of these people who are making this demand, is a vehicle that we could use to raise the pressure on them. Which Danny will be talking more about in a moment. So through creative ideas like delivering your letters in a protest, or reading out your letters from constituents at a town hall, ways to mobilize your community to take that letter and do something more with it, to confront an elected official, to make sure that our voices are not ignored. So if you are down to write a letter today, whether you print out a letter on this page right here, or you write your own handwritten letter, you could just take out a sheet of notebook paper and start writing your personal message. If you can commit to doing that today, please type in the chat and say, I'll mail my letter today, or as soon as you can mail it. Would love to see if we can get some letters flowing, that physical representation that's harder to ignore when physical mailboxes start filling up. So please hop in the chat and say if you'll mail your letter, or drop an emoji to commit to mailing today. And then many of you have seen this Not My Tax Dollars map, where it breaks down exactly where your tax dollars are going. So you could see this map at notmytaxdollars.org. And it shows like these funds for Israel's weapons could instead fund housing or groceries or healthcare. So one thing that you could do as you're writing your letter, we have this fill in the blank local version of the letter that appears when on the Take Action page. And you could actually enter your city, your state, and pull numbers that are specific to your federal tax dollars in that locale. So for example, if I put down Chicago, I see on the map, this is the estimate of how much weapons to Israel that we sent through our tax dollars in Chicago last year. And that money, that 225 million, could have been spent to fund families with 1 year's of 37,000 families with 1 year of groceries. So you could see I wrote in the number, the location, and the number of families to let my members of Congress know that's where I want my tax dollars to go instead. And then you could write your own personal message in the blank here as well. And then for those of you who want to get more involved, who want to take the next step to mobilize your community, we have a variety of ways that you could do that to raise awareness in your community, in your neighborhood, and to raise the pressure on your elected officials and politicians. And one really important first step that you can take to do that is by signing up for these new community calls that a digital organizing manager, Danny, is going to be leading. I just dropped the link for that in the chat. And our Not My Tax Dollars activist toolbox will cover a lot of these resources that you could use to mobilize your community, whether you are hosting an event with your friends and family to get together, write all your letters together, mail them in, or you're doing a protest to deliver all your letters. Whatever you want to do, we're here to resource you to do that, to provide you with all the resources, guidance, and training to go out and mobilize your community. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Danny to share more about how to do that and how you could join the community calls to get more involved.
Thank you, Kat. Yes, so I'm so excited to be in community calls with you where everyone can unmute and share a bit more about what brings them to the movement and create some space to brainstorm. How are we going to stop arming Israel? And I really do believe that we need to do that in the community. We are not meant to watch a live stream genocide in isolation ever. And so these community calls will be a way that we will continue turning up the heat. It does not end on tax day. This campaign will exist until we stop sending US military funding to Israel. So one way you can do that is by hosting a letter writing event. And that can be something as simple as co-opting your friend's party and asking if you can bring a stack of these letter templates and spend a few minutes just writing letters or passing them out. You could write, I know I've reached out to our local Poets for Palestine to see if we can do, some hate poetry together. Like, we can get really creative here. And I think when we come together in these community calls, more will emerge. So please do sign up using the link in the chat. And we can make it easier for communities to register their dissent. So we can, go ahead and go on to the next slide. I know that Celine covered what it looks like to spark confrontations with politicians, and I'm sure folks here have the cathartic experience of confronting our politicians, but there's still more that we can do. And, at these events that you organize and also in our community calls, we'll be able to brainstorm a bit more about how can we really push these folks to do the right thing and represent our interests and stop arming Israel. And maybe we'll get to hear some folks' tips as well. Next slide, please. And today is tax day, so there are actions happening across the country right now, thanks to Taxpayers Against Genocide and our movement partners. So I know right after this, I'll be heading to the Franchise Tax Board in downtown Los Angeles with Black Lives Matter Los Angeles for a tax day action. And tomorrow this map will reset, and we will likely see more letter writing action. So you can join our community calls to get more information and on how to do that yourself, or you can go to notmytaxdollars.org/resources and see our guide on how to host your own letter writing event and publish it on this map, which will exist again until we can stop arming Israel. We invite you to organize your own letter writing event. Please join our community calls. And next slide, please. You can actually use your phone as well to scan the QR code on the screen in order to register for these calls, and a signal group as well, where we'll be able to be in community with each other. And, you know, if you create a space, like if you see you're elected at the local cafe, like you can have a resource, you can have some folks who will hype you for that confrontation. And then we're also inviting you to donate to offset your taxes, which you can also scan the QR code on the screen here. As you know, the US government sent Israel $12 billion in 2025 to mass murder the Palestinian people, which comes out to around $79.75 per taxpayer on average, to murder our loved ones and ultimately line the pockets of CEOs in a death industry that our tax dollars are funding. And we can support the Palestinian people by cutting off support to Israel's military. And that is what USCPR and USCPR Action, our North Star goal is to end US military funding to Israel. And we will accomplish that in community with the majority of Americans who want to do that. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I'm really looking forward to getting to meet some of you virtually next week. Our first call is Wednesday, April 22nd at 5 p.m. Again, sign up, and I hope to see you on Signal and in our next Zoom call next week. We will have at least 4 community calls scheduled right now leading up to Nakba Day as we continue to escalate and do right by the Palestinian people. I'll pass it back to you, Celine.
Thank you so much, Danny and Kat. Thank you to everyone who committed to mail their letters today, and for all of you who took action with us. And we just want to close, I just want to close this out basically by reiterating the points that were made today. Block the Bombs and the Melt Ice Act are things you can use in your confrontations of these elected officials. It's an organizing tool. You can get them on the record, see if they, to ask, you know, whether they're going to sign them, whether they're going to support them. I mean, and also just to remember that, like, in terms of the context that we're in right now, the genocide is not over, right? Like, it continues right now. There's also the genocide that continues behind prison bars. We know, you know, we've all seen that the execution bill was passed by the Knesset, you know, in the settler state of Israel, right? And what that means for the Palestinian struggle. We know the fact that, you know, the entire condition of Palestinians is one of imprisonment. And so, and like these tactics to try to literally genocide our prisoners behind bars who are sitting with no charges in the prisons is an act of like a grave human rights violation. And it's also like there's an attempt to not have you know, media attention on it. This is a deliberate attempt to not focus on this. So it's really important that, you know, we also want to highlight that in 2 days it's Prisoners Day, April 17th. This week, there's also a Prisoners Week of Action. It's important for us to really tie these conversations together to say, this is what our tax dollars are funding. They're funding the continuation of the genocide in all of its forms, including the imprisonment and the execution of prisoners in Palestine. And also to know that right now what we are facing is that the threat of a greater Israel has never been more real than it is today. Mike Huckabee basically said, yeah, Israel can take all the land that they want. This war across the region from Palestine to Lebanon to Iran is an attempt to realize that. And so it's really important for us, really important for us to increase the conversation around this, because we need to keep Palestine on the agenda. We need to keep all attention and all eyes on the region right now. And it's really important to really reinforce this and make sure that these elected officials who basically sign off on this continued military funding to Israel know that we're not going away and that we're not going to get tired anytime soon, right? Like, we need to really increase the pressure and really use any tactic that we can possible and continue to organize on a local level, whether it's both through our longer term campaigns for divestment, for arms embargo, and also just using these bird dogging tactics. There's going to be events where, elected officials are going to be speaking. Show up, put them on the spot, asking them questions. In the toolkit, you'll find all the resources that you need to learn to see different examples of where this has happened before, and learn how to put together your own team to bird dog. And so just want to summarize that, just want to kind of close this out with the seriousness, of course, of the situation that we're in, and just, ensuring that we continue to isolate Israel on a narrative level, and also on a material level as much as we can through our continued organizing work. And it's going to be important for us, of course, to continue to organize on a local level and make the connections between what ICE is doing in the US and the broader imperialist wars that the US is waging all over the world. So just want to end us there. Thank you all for staying on a little bit longer than usual. We will send out all the materials and really encourage you all to send the toolkits, the resources, and the action tools to your networks, your organizations, your friends and family. And we'll hopefully see you all at the next webinar. Thanks also.